Hey, what's good? Welcome to Conversationalist Corner, a podcast that explores the world of conversation. My name is Paul Larson, and I'm here with my co-host, Jacob White. Super excited to have you here, and we hope that as you listen in today, that you learn the things that enable you to have the best conversations anytime, any place, and with anybody. Alrighty, everybody. Welcome to another episode of your favorite podcast, Conversationalist Corner. We're super duper excited to have you listening today. And today's going to be a little bit of a special topic. In preparation of Thanksgiving and the holiday season, we decided to give you guys a gift. And we have a super special guest here on the podcast with us today.
Yeah. Today, our guest is Rebecca Clarke, Paul and I's favorite religion professor here at BYU. She's from Orem, Utah. She has a master's, an undergraduate in psychology, a master's in marriage and family therapy and counseling, and a PhD in marriage, family, and human development, all from BYU. She is currently an eternal families professor at BYU. She is the mother of 4 children and happily married to her husband, Sam.
Yeah, well, thank you, and welcome to the podcast, Sister Clarke. We're super excited to have you here.
I'm excited to be here. Thanks, you guys.
Yeah, for everyone who's listening, like Jacob said, Sister Clarke is our favorite religion professor. I actually took her class, I believe it was last fall or last winter, and then I liked it so much that I recommended it to Jacob. Yeah. I was like, you have to take Eternal Families here at BYU. It's a wonderful part of our curriculum. And I said, Jacob, you have to take it with this professor. And my cousin Allie had taken your class, Sister Clarke, even before I had. So
really,
yeah,
I love it. Keep feeding me all the best students. That's exactly what I want.
We're trying our best. Hopefully that Jacob hasn't been too distracted in class.
Right. There's been a couple of moments, but it's all right. We're working through it.
That's good to hear. But yeah, Sister Clarke, we are so happy to have you here, and we're excited to hear insights. But before we jump into kind of the meat of today's episode and the super interesting conversationalist topics that we're going to address, we'd love to just hear how life is going for you right now.
Thank you. We had an exciting week. Let me think. Was it last week or just this past weekend? My oldest daughter, Eliza, who is now 27, which surprises me to no end. But she did a full Ironman in Arizona. And so she biked 2.2 miles. And then she swam 2.2 miles. Then she biked 112 miles, and then she ran a full marathon. So 26.2, is it? Or is that what it is?
Yeah.
Miles after that. So she did it. She set this goal and she said, I don't want it to take over my life, but I want to do this and I want to just finish. Like her whole goal was to finish, and she did it. And it was really impressive. And so we all flew down there to watch her and to support her. And, it was tiring just to watch, you guys. It was tiring to be on the sidelines. So I can't imagine being able to do such a feat. But anyway, it was really impressive. It was super fun for our family.
That's super cool. Do you think that have your younger kids already gotten into endurance sports, or are they working their way up to that?
They're working their way up to that, but her younger sister, so Emmy, our second daughter, has already run a couple of 50-mile races. And so Eliza said, and my husband Sam's a great athlete in those kind of endurance races as well. But Eliza said, well, they've already done that, so I've got to do something that they haven't done yet. So that was the last frontier. I don't know what's left after this, but anyway, I fortunately don't feel any need to prove myself in this area. So I'm happy to just sit back and cheer.
You're the professional support.
That's right. So,
no one does it better than you, I'm sure. That's super cool, though. I love to hear that. But yeah, we're super glad to hear that. And I love hearing that because I'm not in your class anymore. So it's fun to still hear about your family and how they're doing.
Thanks.
But yeah, so today we'd love to talk about families, and everyone who's listening, you'll be listening to this as we release it, but we're recording this, I think today's November 21st, and we're going to be releasing it just a couple of days before Thanksgiving so that you all can be happy and prepared to participate. Right, participate peacefully in family dialogues around that Thanksgiving table. But Jacob and I, we've got a pretty good understanding of families and how to have conversations. Jacob's currently starting his family, so this is going to be really important to him.
Yeah,
That's right.
But yeah, for all of our audience, we really wanted to have a more veteran, more experienced, more professional voice on this subject, and that's why we brought in our favorite professor. Should we call you Sister Clarke? Should we call you Professor Clarke?
You can call me Rebecca. That's
all right,
totally
Rebecca.
great.
All right.
Yep.
So a little weird to have that switch up, but I love it. So Rebecca, one thing that you mentioned as we were preparing for this podcast and as we were discussing before is there's a particular story that comes to your mind about communication, particularly between a husband and a wife. And we would love it if you could share this story and kind of teach us through this story why communication is not only important, but forgive me. If you could teach us not only why communication is important, but why the right types of communication are important and all the things that go in behind that.
Good. Yes. Yes. So when I was a young master's degree seeking student, back in the late 1990s, maybe about 2000, this story occurred. And so I was young in my marriage too. And we were just at that time in the marriage and family therapy world, communication was all the rage, and it was, tools, tips, you had courses on communication, and that is really wise because you can move levers with that. You can get, you teach couples how to use I statements, for example, how to lead with I feel, a certain way rather than an accusation kind of, or an accusing kind of opener. You did this, but more own it. I feel this way. So anyway, we're all excited about how much this might help couples and families, these tools in communication. And so I, as a young therapist, I am thrilled to put my newfound knowledge to use and change lives. And I had a couple come in, and this particular couple, the husband was happened to be an attorney, and the wife, I think, was a stay-at-home mom. And they had some pretty deep disagreements around some stuff in their marriage. And I thought, today's the day. I'm going to teach them how to communicate. I'm going to teach them about I statements. We're going to talk about, holding the floor and slowing things down, all of which are really important. And these actually really do impact communication. But this day I learned a lesson beyond that. And it was that I taught this couple, all these tips and tricks, and the husband started to talk to his wife and using all of these new skills that I had just taught, and just be incredibly cruel to her. Just really, it was brutal. And I thought, I kept thinking, when do I intervene? Because this is but he's doing everything right. Technically, he was doing all the things I taught him. And so in that moment, I've never forgotten this, that communication has so much to do with our hearts. Good communication is tips, tricks, slowing things down, I statements, they're all valuable. But if our heart is in the wrong place, if we want to be peacemakers in our communication, if we want to experience connection in our communication, we have to have our hearts in the right place. Otherwise, we are just going to be extremely good communicators who are great at communicating our cruelty, who are great at eloquently maybe being really mean and demeaning. Yeah. And so that's where I want today listeners, in terms of talking about peaceful communication, that's where I want to start, is that I don't know if it's impossible, but it's really hard to have good, connective, peaceful communication if our hearts are not in the right place.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that story. I think it's a powerful statement on, it's not just your conversation skills that matter. It matters where your conversationalist heart is, and
Yep.
kind of the nature of it. And I think that your background as a therapist has to be so powerful in your understanding of that. And it makes me think of something that we've been discussing here on the podcast, which is becoming a proactive peacemaker. And I think that having your heart in a good place is often the first step to keeping everything calm and never letting any contention break into your relations and into your communications. But not everybody has that heart, right? Not everyone is seeking to prevent contention. And so, what are some of the things that you do as a therapist, and things that you've seen not only in your professional life but in your personal life that help people develop that heart and develop that nature, even if it's not quite there at the beginning of the kind of the process of working on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. One of the most important things, and now professionally, I no longer therapy people, but when I'm going to go back and tell another quick story of my degree there, because it was so impressive to me. I got to take a class from a play therapist, a man who was an excellent play therapist, which means he would be working with children who were up to about 11 years old. And so after about 11, you kind of age out of being able to utilize play therapy very effectively. But one of the things he talked about all the time was he talked about temenos, which is a Greek word for like a sacred space or a safe space. And he said, and then I got to watch him in action. We got to observe him, doing play therapy with kids. And he said, I really, when I'm working with a child, I almost could care less about their parents, which I thought that's a little much, but then we saw it in action and I saw what he meant. And one of the coolest things that he did was he would get on that child's level and he would literally just squat down to however eye level age that child was, however tall that child was, and he would talk to them on that level. And I think there is something so important and beautiful about trying to guard those spaces, the spaces between us, because you have different levels of communication. You guys have probably talked about this, but we have, the superficial level where we, cashier at Trader Joe's, and it's like, we just have to chit chat and let's be pleasant. And it's low risk, there's not a lot of connection going on there, but we might as well be pleasant and focus on, details and whatnot. But then there's like that personal level, which I think we get into this medium risk space where we've got, and I think we would get there in a classroom. I think that we would be able to sometimes start to share, or with a good friend, start to share personal, details or things like that. And there's, if we're accepted positively, we share more. But then we've got that really kind of vulnerable, highest level of communication. And that's where the greatest connection can occur. It's also where our greatest pain can occur. And so it's, I think I could have a sibling say something to me that could bring me to tears just because they know me so well, right? Or of course my spouse, like it wouldn't take much because I'm vulnerable in that space. So I think trying to guard temenos, that idea, like in any kind of important relationship, that space between us as sacred, regarding that as sacred so that we can really connect, is so important. It's just so important. And yet we all have family members where we think, well, they're going to come out swinging, they're going to try to do this or that or whatever. And I think with that, I want to talk about, I used to teach writing at BYU, and my one good dear friend, who's also a writing professor, she had an assignment that I think is so helpful. And she had, and I think this is helpful in families as well. Mm-hmm. She had students, so university students, pick a topic, a social cause, a religious cause, a political cause, something that they felt really strongly about and identified with thoroughly, like really believed in it. And then she had them write a paper, maybe it was a paragraph or something, about, okay, describe the people who hold this belief that is opposite from you. So describe the opposing, somebody who would oppose your dearly held beliefs. But they would oppose that. And she said she got responses like, these people are, quite frankly, they're uneducated. They are extreme. They are selfish.
Objectively bad people.
Just really bad people, and people trying to write it for their college professor. Like, how do I say these people are terrible, in a studious way? Yeah. So she got lots of descriptions like that. And then she had them go do an assignment where, of course, this is coming because you're in a, they should have seen the trap she was setting. But she had them go find two real people who held those opposing beliefs and listen to why they held those beliefs. And that's all they got to do. She's like, you don't get to preach. You don't get to teach. You must not try to persuade. You're just going to listen to how they came to their beliefs. And they did it. And she said, not a student changed their minds on any of the beliefs, these dearly held beliefs, not the people talking, not the people being interviewed. But she said, then she had them write a paragraph. Now, what do you think about people who hold opposite beliefs that are different from yours in these places that matter very much to you, these religious beliefs or whatever? And as you can imagine, not a single student came away with anything less than, I now understand, I understand where they're coming from, and we have a lot more in common than we think, and, so on and so forth. And so I think it can be particularly hard with family because we think we know, we think we
have them figured out. I've lived with them all my life.
Yeah.
I know them in and out.
Right. We've sat through the same meals together. We've gone on the same vacations together, whatever. And yet, I think if we fail to really listen, I think we are going to invite trouble. I don't think we're inviting peace like we could. So I think, and most of us want to talk. I mean, I've been rambling on here right now on this podcast, but most of us want to hear ourselves speak. But if you can dial it back and I think that's a really great way to be a proactive peacemaker, is to say, you know what, I'm going to actually ask that person a question, and I'm not going to try to preach or teach or persuade. I'm just going to listen, and I'm just going to see, like, how come we differ on this hot button issue? How come we came to different conclusions? I think that can guard that temenos, that space, create that temenos, that space between in relationships. And family relationships are just naturally vulnerable. They are. People see you in families. They kind of see you at your best and your worst. And, I get to see Eliza run across the Ironman finish line, and yet we've also had really moments in our relationship where it's like not that glorious, and vulnerable and moments and painful moments. But keeping that space safe is really important. Allowing, especially for all of us, but I was going to say, especially parents with kids, I think there's something important when you hold a certain amount of power, maybe, or authority naturally in a relationship, that we don't abuse that, and we don't,
abuse it. Right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, we could talk more about Well, I think we know too, if that risk fails, if we take a risk, if I reach out to you and I try to share something with you that matters an awful lot to me. And if that risk fails, if you say to me, well, here's an example. Like, we get really vulnerable in our families and marriages when we say, I don't feel loved by you. Back to our opening story of the couple, it was
Right.
essentially that. She didn't feel safe with him. She didn't feel necessarily loved. And it turned into, you can answer that in so many ways, but it turned into him breaking temenos, breaking that safe space and saying, why wouldn't you feel loved? That's basically stupid. Are you not smart enough to see that I work for our family and provide just really ugly stuff.
Right.
But think of the difference of whether if we could say, maybe that might hurt my feelings to hear a spouse, doesn't feel loved. I mean, that would hurt my feelings. That would kind of crush me. But rather than responding with like, me first, let me tell you, just really listening and saying, man, I hate that's hard for me to hear. Tell me more. And it's like that right there is going to create
Totally.
so much more connection. And then if we have the wherewithal to slow things down and say, you know what? I'll tell you how much I love you. Let me tell you, because I got a long list. How long do you have? That's even better, right?
Yeah.
Not even just neutral, but positive. So anyway.
No, thank you so much for sharing that. It wasn't necessarily something I was thinking about in preparation of today, but you're right that families are just immediately once you enter this earth into a family, you have that connection to these people and you have this space that is in between you. And for most of us, that's a very sacred space. It's I like this idea. It was temenos is what it's called.
Temenos, yeah, it's a Greek
Right.
word with a T. Yeah.
Perfect. So that temenos exists between us, but I think because it's always existed, because we're always working with it, it is easy to take for granted. I think it's kind of what we were getting at there, that it's easy to forget that while it was given to us, we do have to take stewardship of it and we do have to protect it and build it and grow it. I think of my relationship with my parents. I love them to death. They're amazing parents because of the way that I communicated and even some of the ways that they communicated. In high school, that temenos was a little bit strained, and I think that probably that's most parents and most teenagers.
Yeah.
But ever since I left home, I've realized that space is a sacred space and that it shouldn't be taken for granted. And now both me and my parents have actively pushed towards being better communicators, taking care of each other. And now that space is even more sacred and more special to me than even whenever I was a little kid, right? When I was dependent on them and my survival depended on this space that existed. Now it doesn't, but it's even more special to me now.
Yeah. I love the part where you talked about like just the intentional listening to understand, not to kind of think of an argument back or kind of have some sort of contempt towards that person. And I think that's something that I've seen be so important, especially like Paul just said with my relationship with my parents. I've always had a pretty good relationship with my parents. But sometimes in high school, like Paul said, you just kind of think differently than they do for
It's that stupid puberty.
Yeah.
It gets us all.
It gets us all. But
It was the worst.
Right?
It became a special place after that I was able to kind of connect with my parents and actually like go to them for advice and then listen to learn, not just listen because they were the authoritative kind of word in my life. And I really thought that was super, super cool, the thought that you brought up.
Yeah. And one thing that you mentioned kind of at the end there is you mentioned like obviously listening is important, but if you're speaking, bring up that list of reasons why you love them and be like, I love you because of X, Y, Z, and being expressive in that. And I think that's a great action item if you're listening and you think, I don't really know how to approach that space, right, with my family, or I don't know how to start creating that space. Obviously being very explicit in the things that you love and care about people is one action item. But are there any other kind of specific action items that are simple things that someone can just do today, this week, this month to just see, recognize that space and take care of it a little bit?
Yeah, such a great question. I think I'm going to draw from the research on building romantic relationships in this, but it's just, I mean, it works to build all types of relationships, and it is to spend, talk. They say it's like the 3 T's. It's talk, time, and togetherness. And so just being together, we have so much more time in it today. Now, if you look at modern families, we have more time together than we've ever had, but it feels like we have less because a lot of times we're engaging in alone together time, which is we're sitting in
The paradox.
we're all sitting around the table and we're all looking at our screens. I mean, when you go out, I mean, you see that, right? When you watch people, I maybe not everyone watches people like I do, but I love.
We definitely do. People watchers.
I love people watching, and I just think, oh my gosh, put your phone down, But I think that relationships are built, and they don't just happen. When you ask people who are in great marriages and who have great parent-child relationships, they didn't just stumble into it. You'll never have somebody say, I don't know. It just happened, and it just seemed to last for 50 years, and we just happened to get along. It's, I think, all about that talk and time and togetherness. And so I think it's, temenos. I think a real temenos breaker is your phone. In your hand. I mean, I think, there are studies that say your phone on the table between you, if you're out to dinner, say, like in that situation, just having your phone out is problematic. It makes the person who's speaking lose their place. They start to get jumbled on what they're trying to say. And so I just think that if you want to create that space, obviously you have to be safe. You have to be a safe communicator. Which means a lot of times it means empathizing. It means validating. Validation in communication doesn't mean I'm agreeing with you and how you're handling it. Like I might not think, one example of this is when my youngest son, I'm just going to tell the story on him. But my youngest son, when he used to come home and realize it was piano lesson day, it was like flat on the ground on the kitchen floor, kicking and literally like crying.
Sounds like me as a child.
See, there we go. I mean, and it's like, if I want to create temenos, if I want to create a safe space between us, a communication space, it's not a good idea in that moment to say, like yelling down from the above, if you would have practiced, you wouldn't feel so bad right now, and you'd be ready to go, and you shouldn't be that tired, or, we spend a lot of money on these lessons or whatever. Instead, what's going to build temenos in that moment is going to be validation and empathy. And it's going to be saying, even if I don't think that that's the reaction that is commensurate with having to be driven to piano lessons, with the greatest piano teacher in the world, whatever, which we have, it's just a matter of saying, wow, it sounds like you're tired. It sounds like you're tired. And yeah, I am tired. And then, all right. I mean, you still have to go, it's not like you are saying, well, let's, forget this, but okay. Yeah. If I can help you, let me help you. But I think it's just a matter of really trying to see each other for who we are.
Just a quick comment. I really loved the little experience you shared with your son, because something that we talked about 2 weeks ago was one of the habits of a peacemaker is essentially having non-closure of, you don't have to be on the same page. Like you don't
love it.
You don't have to
Yeah,
They don't have
agree.
to perfectly agree with everything you say. You don't have to agree
Perfect.
with perfectly them. And I think that a child-parent interaction like piano lessons is a great place. It's like we're just gonna have to agree to disagree
Right.
about piano lessons until you hit, you're 12 years old, you're 18 years old, or whatever. And
Love it.
that kind of addresses, I think, the fact that not only I think is that just create immediate peace, but also in addressing temenos, it shows, hey, like this is just kind of how it is, but it's not going to affect us. Like our temenos is not contingent upon agreement. We can continue to disagree without any sort of we can continue to
Damage.
disagree without damaging that space. And I think that's
Yes.
kind of more maybe an advanced kind of second level to this idea. But it's definitely true where it's like peacemaking is not just solving all the world's problems.
Yeah.
Right. Right. I love that. I mean, we're going to have conflict. We are
Oh yeah.
going to have conflict. And that's not actually a big deal. It's actually not a problem. When you have marriages that are high in trust and satisfaction and they have conflict and they work through that conflict, they actually report higher levels of trust and satisfaction. It's like you can't get them down. You can't beat these people. They're
Amen.
using their conflict to understand that, yeah, we have this space between us, but really the problem is we're going to tackle it together and keep this space between us really sacred and safe. It matters so much how we see each other and how, we are built, human beings are built to look for the negative in people and in the world. And that's great because, of course, that keeps us safe, right? If I look for threats, if I am not willing to say something over there looks dangerous or off, then I'm going to be eaten by
The
whatever
lion.
the lion that's in the bushes that I refuse to acknowledge, right, as a problem. But knowing that we need to kind of I don't know, with our frontal lobes, like we need to sort of offset that,
Yeah.
consciously offset that. And there was kind of the man who is often kind of given the title of the father of systems theory or marriage and family therapy. So where you're looking at two people in relationship rather than just one person, like you picture the Freud version of therapy where it's one person on a couch. But with Martin Buber is his name, and he was an Austrian Hasidic Jew, and he lived in the late 1800s and I think died in the 1960s. But anyway, his philosophy is really beautiful and I think it really ties into your ideas about peacemaking and communication. And he claimed that there are two ways to relate to people, and that it is only through relating to others that we will find the divine and that we will find God and that we will find the best in ourselves. And so, it's kind of this idea that love really does require otherness, doesn't it? Like if I am really going to love and learn to love, I have to learn to love another, something outside of myself. And so he had this beautiful kind of this beautiful wording, and it's just it. He says we see each other in one of two ways, either in the it perspective or the I thou perspective. Now, thou comes from the German du, and that's just a familiar. So it's not like we need to see each other in an old-fashioned way, but in a familiar way. And so the it perspective, and we need to have an it perspective in some part of our days and some part of our lives to just get through the days. But it is where I am seeing you as an object, and I am seeing you as either an obstacle or some way for me to get what I want. And so I am making you into not even a real person. Like you are just either an impediment to me or kind of like a vending machine that will give me what I want if I put in enough coins, right?
Yeah.
So that's the it perspective. And we need that to a degree when we're, Again, Trader Joe's comes to mind, where they have those friendly cashiers. But like, we're not going to enter into a relationship with these people, but we want to see people as much as we can in our lives, says Martin Buber, as a thou. Like, we want to see other people as legitimate, as separate from ourselves, that we don't have to line up on that. That's the cool thing about connection, is we don't have to, our Venn diagrams of interests and likes, we don't have, and political ideals and, you know, whatever, educational accomplishments, they don't have to line up exactly. In fact, how uninteresting if they did. But if we see each other as a thou, then I am engaging with you, with the knowledge that you are a real, legitimate other, separate from me, but that deserves all the respect in the world. Like, I deserve respect from you, you deserve respect from me. And if we enter into that kind of relationship, then that's where Martin Buber says, that's where we meet, that's where we find the divine, is in that in-between space. Yeah. That space between us becomes so important. And
yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. One thought that comes to mind with that I thou is, it's easy. I feel like it could be easy to slip into that in families, because it's, oh, this is my brother, this is my mother, this is my dad. And so essentially, I mean, by maybe not necessarily all the time, but sometimes it can be easy to think of them as just, you know, a character in your story, right? Mm-hmm. And they're just, you know, they're only important because of this familial relationship that exists, but not because of who that person is as an individual, as a divine being, as a personality.
Yeah, I love that. I think, you know, if I'm looking at Christian on the face down on the kitchen floor, and, you know, before piano, if he's an obstacle to me, if that's an it, and it's really easy to do that to kids because they're littler, and it's easy to see them as obstacles, you know, in the way of what I wanted to do this afternoon or whatever. But if I look at him as an it, I'm not even going to care about his feelings. I'm not even going to engage. It's going to be this, you know, get up, get in the car, stop your whining, you know, this is ridiculous or whatever. Whereas if I see him as a thou, that changes everything. If I see him as a real legitimate person with needs, even though he's younger than me or different from me, I think you're absolutely right that we sometimes tend to make cardboard caricatures, cardboard cutouts of our family members. We think we know when we haven't really taken the moment to listen or really see. And the cool thing about his philosophy, it's called dialogical philosophy, but the cool thing about this philosophy is there's an I in both of these ways of seeing. It's I hyphen it or I hyphen thou. And so I am connected. It's going to change my life if I walk through my life seeing people in through a thou perspective or lens. And it's going to change my life if I walk through my life thinking everyone's in it. And so everyone's either in my way or going to give me something. And so let me maximize that. It turns relationships into transactions. And it really minimizes that ability to have that space between us be meaningful and connective. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Being able to see people as people and see them for who they really are, and taking time to connect with them on a personal level, even when it's people that you're so close to as your family, having that slight mindset shift, I think, can do wonders. Even for people that, I feel like the thing is with extended family, especially if we're talking about Thanksgiving, we often get like an image or idea of who that person is in our mind because of our couple. Some extended family we see a bunch, and some we don't see them very much. So we paint pictures of those people in certain ways, and that's kind of the way that we see them. The fact that like we paint a picture of like our aunts or uncles or cousins in the couple interactions that we have a year or every week for some people, or every couple of years. And so it's so interesting that like we can have that framework of them, even though they might be a much bigger and more complex person, but often in our minds they become so kind of one-dimensional and kind of one-tracked in people.
Yeah, you have the fun uncle, you have the gossipy aunt, you
Yep.
have, the older individual in the family that's super old fashioned.
Yeah.
And those
Yep.
are, and oftentimes I think it's important, and this is a great chance to be reactively proactive, to recognize that those narratives that you've created about these people, speaking for my own family, a lot of time these narratives are not created personally by myself, but often they are passed down
Yeah.
by my parents or by my cousins or stuff like that. And so it can become with families, I mean, we're all just connected so much that odds are if you're thinking that, it's probably because someone else told you that, or you're telling other people that. And so this is a great chance for you to kind of hit pause and be like, hey, this is a chance for me to not just bless the temenos of my relationship with this individual, but I can also help this person fix their temenos with grandma, with their cousin, whatever it is, and they can be like, and if you make that difference and if you share that, I personally think that that will change the perspectives of your family members, because that's probably how you got your perspective in the first place, was because someone
I
else
like that.
did some complaining.
I like that. Some intergenerational temenos. You're going to cover your Thanksgiving. You're going to be in a bubble
Oh yeah.
of temenos.
Give everyone that blank slate that they deserve.
Yeah, it'll be halos.
It's going to be great.
Angels singing and whatnot. Yeah.
You know what? It does make a huge difference, though. It really does. And I think one thing that you guys are tuning into that's really lovely, and I think we've kind of hovered around this, but is just the idea that connection and peacemaking doesn't mean agreeing on all of the things like 100%. Like it does not mean liking both of you want to watch the same football game on Thanksgiving afternoon, or even wanting to watch a football game or wanting to watch TV at all. Like, you don't have to have that to have peacemaking communication. I think we sometimes have, in our world of where we have such ease with which we curate our social circles and our social inputs, our kind of, our groups. And then we go into a family where we didn't curate that person into it, right? Like, they're just there and they're still there, and we can't swipe them out, and it's like, I think it's a really beautiful thing to understand that we don't have to have voted for the same candidate to be able to connect and communicate on stuff that really matters. And so anyway, I just like that you guys are bringing that up.
Yeah, just really briefly, something that you taught in your class was kind of these four horsemen of kind of damaging relationships, and kind of how indicators that your temenos is in danger or it has been damaged. And I'd love for you to maybe go over what those four horsemen are, and then I'd love to kind of hear your input on how we can address those, and maybe if you think that boundaries are ever important to set, because that's something that I've actually been thinking about a lot, just with certain relationships that are going on in my life. It is great to try your best to create this temenos and whatnot, but oftentimes, it is your responsibility to take care of that temenos, but it is also impacted by the other person, right?
Yeah.
And so sometimes those people, for whatever reason, obviously we'll give them the benefit and the doubt and say that, there's something that's hurting them or that they don't understand. But oftentimes those people can hurt us in this temenos. And I think that boundaries can be a difficult thing to discuss, and to maybe they can be a scary thing. I don't know. I know that they are for me. And so I'd love to just kind of hear your take on boundaries. After we kind of talk about what are these four horsemen and how maybe boundaries could help or hurt, they might hurt. in regards to fixing those four horsemen.
I love that. Yeah. So this is John and Julie, doctors John and Julie Gottman. This is their work, and they found their marriage researchers for the most part, and they found that they could predict divorce within the next 5 years in a couple with like an 85% degree of like accuracy, which was just like, you don't get any numbers like that in social sciences, but
Not at all.
they got them. And so they found four patterns. They would bring couples into their lab, and they just said, discuss something that's high tension between the two of you, discuss an issue, a problem, and they would just watch them discuss it, and for about 15 minutes, and then they would have researchers go through and kind of code, what they were seeing. And they found that where these patterns were prevalent, these four patterns, this indicated that, the four horsemen of the apocalypse, like this is the beginning of the end of days for this relationship. So the four horsemen that they noted were criticism. So if there was a high degree of criticism, contempt, so attacking the other person with the intent to insult or abuse, defensiveness, where you victimize yourself to save yourself. You can't take the heat, so it's like, but you did that too, you made me do that or whatever. And then stonewalling, which is, of course, just shutting down completely. So those were the four horsemen. And again, we will all engage in these behaviors at some point in our relationships. This does not mean you're going to get divorced or whatever. But if this is a pattern, they just found that if people were really relying on this way to communicate, on these ways of to communicate, that it was spelling the beginning of the end for these couples. And so with criticism, I just want to kind of talk about them for just a little, kind of a moment more. With criticism, they found that women were more likely to criticize, and men were more likely to, do you want to guess? Out of criticism. Yes, you got it.
Hey, I've already had that lecture, so
I guess. I haven't had it yet.
So Jacob was more the honest guess.
That was good. That was really good. Yes, Stonewall. And actually both genders, in this case, both men and women, are trying oftentimes with these communication tactics. They're trying to do something good. So men, we know, in conflict, they get more kind of physiologically aroused. It's more painful for them to be in relational conflict. It's easier, actually, for women to address relational issues than it is for men in general. Wow. And so men are stonewalling because they're getting their heart rates are going up, and they're saying, look, I don't want to make this worse, so I'm just going to shut down. Women are feeling this kind of pulling away, and so they're kind of chasing after their partner, so to speak, and saying, critique after critique, like, this is what you're doing wrong, and now look at you now, you're not even talking to me, now you've gone quiet, so what's the problem? So yeah. This is those are the four horsemen. Now I am going to talk about the antidotes in a moment, but I want to make the point that of those four horsemen, the one that is most problematic and leads quickest to divorce and is the most highly toxic trait is the contempt piece. And so when we're attacking somebody else, when we're intending to abuse, I don't know, do you guys have any thoughts on why contempt would be so highly problematic? Do you want to think about what that is?
I think that it makes a lot of sense that contempt is dangerous, and I think that contempt comes from so many different places. It comes from trying to reach an agreement when you can't. It comes from being criticized, being stonewalled against, and all that. But I think that with contempt, for me, is we've talked so much today about seeing the other person and loving the other person, right? And I think contempt is the loss of that love and that loss of that perspective. And so if that's gone, you got to kind of start from scratch. It doesn't matter how beautifully your conversations go or
Right.
all the solutions that you get to. If there's that contempt, it's just going to fester away. Um, and just, I think it'll really damage your humanity and the humanity that you place in other people.
Yeah, I think also just like the contempt, when we have contentment towards someone else, I feel like that often like erases all positive things that we've ever thought about them, or any positive temenos that we've built with that person kind of just disappears. And we start to see them only in that light of negativity that we're feeling. And that when you see someone that you have loved for so many years in a way almost as like an enemy, or someone that is like like an
The other,
opposite,
and
yeah,
it almost.
an
Yeah.
opposition to what you're trying to accomplish or who you're trying to be. It leads to just, I think, just it's like a crumbling of a marriage or a relationship.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's true. I think it all this all ties together so beautifully. If we aren't seeing someone with some love, I don't know if our heart's really not in it. I don't know, like you're saying, like all of our beautiful words are just gonna kind of come crashing down and could actually be more harmful in a way. But the Gottmans thankfully have taught us how to work against, I guess, these patterns and break these patterns in our communication. And with criticism, it's just kind of that look at the behavior, not like look at like we've got our temenos and here's the problem out here, rather than you are the problem. I'm going to critique you. You didn't take the trash out or whatever. But it's like saying, it's hard for me. It hurts when this behavior happens, or X or Y or Z. So you own it and talk really clearly about the behavior. We have to be able to have these conversations. I'm thinking about boundaries, and I'm thinking, whenever I've been criticized, I don't I don't feel good, like I don't feel good, but sometimes I actually need to hear, sometimes I need it, like as much as I would wish that I could be so perfect that I never needed any feedback or any like little taps, it's not true. And so, I think sometimes we have our boundaries too close to us. We need to be able to say, look, I can see that person is trying to say something to me. And if I'm just going to be critical about them, then, or if they're being critical, it makes it hard to hear. I guess that's what I should say. Then there's, we'll do contempt last, but with defensiveness, it's taking responsibility. That's another one where it's like, I'm great, to throw out a red herring. If Sam says something about me, then I'm like, well, what about you? I can go way back. I know I'm really good because I've got a memory about this stuff that way beats his. He's like, how do you remember that from 13 years ago? And I'm like, I've just been saving up for this very moment. But defensiveness is not going to build connection, right? So we've got to take responsibility. And then stonewalling, I think that actually can be a positive if it's scheduled stonewalling. If you feel yourself in becoming dysregulated, it is fair. Like we've got that saying of, don't go to bed mad. And I say, not as a joke, like absolutely go to bed mad. You're not going to sleep very well, but go to bed mad. Like don't have these arguments at 3 a.m. or when you're all dysregulated and tired. So stonewalling can be fixed so easily just by saying, hey, I know we need to talk about this. Can we talk about it at, and then you set a time, that it's not, so then the partner who is maybe trying to come after the stonewaller is set at ease, like, okay, we are going to address this, but it's going to be when they are more mellow and I'm more mellow and stuff. But then contempt, I think you're right. I think the contempt piece, you've got to go back to building love, because it really is, you've got to think gratitude. You've got to think I'm grateful for, and you feel it sometimes in even with the people you love, it's sometimes pops into your head of like, you know what, this is an obstacle, this is annoying, and yet you check it. I think that's the one that can catch fire and just burn, just a brush fire of just like, you know what else, and you know what else, and you know what else, and you know what else. Because if you want to find something bad about someone, it's not that hard. I mean, it's just not. I mean, you just can do it. And so it just is so important to check yourself and keep your own heart in line. But back to your question about with these four horsemen with boundaries, and people who might be coming at us with contempt. I think it's totally fair to say, hey, this is really affecting me. This is actually hurting my feelings. I don't know if you're intending to. Sometimes that can be nice to stop there and let them explain, because sometimes it can be a surprise. Sometimes it's just an honest mistake. Totally. But that funny story about me when I was 8 years old, I'm kind of over it. And, I'm kind of too sensitive, I guess. I'm not old enough. I'm only 53. You're going to have to stop telling that story. But maybe they don't know, right? And so I think it's totally fair to not in an attitude of calling people out, but in an attitude of making peace, like you guys are talking about. I think it's fair to have boundaries in other ways as well in relationships, like, boundaries around like the stonewalling idea. Like, I don't want to talk about this anymore. Doesn't mean I don't ever want to talk about it, but I'm going to have to put up a boundary about how much longer we can talk about this. I think it's important too for parents to understand the changing nature of families. Like, we have to be willing to redefine families, to redefine traditions, and to redefine relationships. And like, Jacob, you get to go to your in-laws for Thanksgiving. Yep. And how exciting and fun, woo woo, and here you go. And if everyone can work on that together, it's going to be awesome. Yeah. If everyone can kind of be clear about, okay, here's some of our expectations, and maybe one of their expectations is that you bring a something to the meal. Now that you're all grown up, are you going to bring something? Do you know?
I don't know. We're staying at their house, so I'll help make dinner.
You'll help make it, yeah. But that would be a great. That would be a great.
Yeah.
It would be a great way for you to. I mean, I think of these boundaries that we get into with families and in-laws, and and trying to make all these arrangements. I think the best thing parents of adult children can do is invite but don't obligate, right? Like would love to have you on Christmas, but if you can't make it, we are not going to disown you, or we're not going to have.
Then you can't ever come back.
Then that's it. Yeah, exactly. Then that's it. So invite, don't obligate. I think that's a really good. But boundaries have to be renegotiated all the time. And I mean, in communication, in traditions, I guess I'm just thinking of Thanksgiving. But like, being willing on both sides of it to be as clear as you can. Would you like me to chop these onions, and how would you like them chopped?
Yeah.
When you say chop the onions, what do you mean?
Are we going to be dicing them? How finely?
Do you like them minced? What? How small do you want these little cubes? But I think back to the four horsemen. It's not so much about having conflict. We are going to have conflict. It's how we approach it. Yeah. Can we approach it in ways that are not being critiquing, the other person, and not slyly critiquing? You hear sometimes people acting like they're getting away with it, like, oh, it must be nice to be you. It's like, you're not getting away with it. You're just criticizing, and not being defensive, trying to like open it up. If someone says something to you, did you mean for me to hear that in, like, really take that to heart? Like, that can be a wonderful thing. And instead of just walking away being hurt and resenting them, and then stonewalling, it sounds like we need to have a talk about this. Can we do this at whatever time? Mm-hmm. And then contempt is more of an interior thing where you just have to keep checking yourself. You're just going to have to keep checking yourself. But we don't have to stay in those negative patterns.
Yeah.
There are exit ramps. And for some reason, sometimes we're a little hesitant to take those exit ramps. Just exit. Sometimes when you can tell the argument isn't like a real argument, which is Latin for to make clear, when it's getting beyond that and it's trying to win or, be mean or whatever, then I think you need to start to think, what's the exit ramp here? And I see that as a boundary. Like, the exit ramp might be to gently say this hurts, or call their behavior to attention, or it might be, in our family of creation, we want to do something a little different this year, or, things like that.
Yeah.
I will say one quick thing. I will say, in extended family situations, when you have to bring something up to your in-laws, your spouse should be the person to do that. Generally, the child of the parents should be the ones to set those boundaries and explain those boundaries, not the in-law, doing that kind of thing. They already speak the same language, so it goes a lot smoother.
They already have that. Oh my goodness, I forgot how to pronounce it. Temenos? They already have that temenos created, so hopefully it'll be easier.
It's much stronger, much
stronger than Jacob and his in-laws.
I do love my in-laws, and
you do. I know you do.
They listen to this podcast regularly, so hopefully they love what you're sharing, because I
good.
I'm one that's big for analogies. I love the exit ramp idea. One that I was thinking of is, you talked about some of the stonewalling, how it can be beneficial sometimes if done correctly. And I kind of shifted that in my mind of stonewalling being a toxic thing, but using a fence can be a positive thing. Because a fence, I think of my neighbors when I grew up. We had chain link fences, right? So their yard was their yard, my yard, our yard was our yard. There was no question about it. But you could see through the other fence. There was no, we weren't trying to hide from each other or stuff like that. Oftentimes, I got to know my old neighbor Cheryl at that fence. She would come and talk to us while we were playing soccer.
But I feel like the way to create connection is to think, be a peacemaker. I just love your guys' focus. I love your focus. I love you as students too. You guys are wonderful students. So Jacob, to your in-laws, you are so fabulous. And then Paul, do you have in-laws?
No, not quite.
Your future in-laws are going to be so lucky to have you in their family. But I love that you are thinking through ways that we can connect with other people and connect in healthy and happy ways. And I think my parting thought is kind of my beginning thought. It matches with it in just really remembering that communication is about more than about the words we use. It's about our heart set, and it's about our willingness to see other people through a loving lens. So, yeah.
Thank you so much, Rebecca, Sister Clarke. We've really appreciated just this whole time that you've spent with us. I know it's a little bit longer than we initially anticipated or intended, but it's been so awesome to hear all this professional insights and also your personal insights on this topic of how to be a peacemaker within conversations with our family. And we are sure that all the listeners will get a lot of insight out of this and a lot of help. And we just wanted to thank you so much for doing this. It means so much.
Oh, you are welcome.
And thank you everyone for listening. We love you. We're excited that you get to go have Thanksgiving with your families, hopefully with some new ideas. Hopefully there was people that you thought of, experiences that you thought of throughout this episode. And we really just hope that at the end of the day, this is a good Thanksgiving for you. But we will see you all next week.
Yeah.
Bye.
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 Hey, Jacob here. Hoping you guys really appreciated and enjoyed that episode. We are so grateful again to Rebecca Clarke and the preparation and insights that she brought to that episode. And it was just so so amazing to hear all her wonderful insights and tips and tricks, and professional and otherwise. But we just wanted to also thank you guys for listening. And if you feel so inclined, please share this with someone else that you think could benefit from it. Word of mouth is the best way that we can grow this podcast. So we would really appreciate if you feel that someone else would benefit from this, that you will just share it with them. Thanks so much, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your holiday season.